Hello, everybody, and welcome to this webinar on gender equality and public policy and surrogacy. So just to precise, here we say gender, but what we mean is sex. So the reality of biological sex for women. I'm really humbled and delighted to welcome extraordinary panelists today. They are a wealth of knowledge and expertise on the topic of surrogacy. My name is Clemence Trilling, and I'm a member of PDF Québec. And so I'm broadcasting here from Québec, where we work on informing our politician about surrogacy, and we have a bill here on the table, so it's very urgent for us here in Quebec. What do we mean by gender equality and public policy? Well, we know when there is a good social infrastructure that so help for caretakers, help for daycares, help for education, help to balance work life and family life. It helps and benefits women. And when these policies are absent, well, it's always the one side that dominates, and women are struggling. With regard to surrogacy, we have two main questions. There are some places, fortunately, where women have had access to some education, even if their participation in the labor market or politics is not as good as it could be. Women have made some progress. But they are still striving for true equality. But these policies sometimes are used by the surrogacy industry to generate profits. So maternity leave and help for families, they are used by the surrogacy industry where they exist. And when they don't exist, unfortunately, well, women, they need to make money to feed their children and cover their basic needs. Therefore, sometimes they cannot find work and meaningful employment in the regular labor market, and surrogacy is presented to them as an option to feed their family. So we have these two sides, and of course, we have noticed that surrogacy, we have to say it benefits men in majority. It gives new rights to men because they are the main clients of surrogacy. So we are, of course, here in this webinar, in this panel, we will try to understand better what's the link between public policies in a country where they exist, so that we can have a real equality, and in the country where this policy, the public policy, don't already exist, and the condition and the reasons why women choose to become surrogate mothers. So it is my delight to introduce our first panelist, is Sheela Saravanan, and she's an Indian researcher and author of several studies of surrogacy in India. Her work has shown the dark reality of this practice and helped to drastically restrict access to it in India. So here we go, Sheela.
Thank you very much for inviting me to this very important seminar. And today I'm going to be talking about surrogacy policy in India and its implication. It's a new change in India that just happened. And there is a Surrogacy Regulation Act that has just been passed at the Parliament. And it was a bill earlier, and now it's become an act. So basically, commercial surrogacy has been prohibited in India. So anybody going to India for surrogacy from abroad cannot do surrogacy anymore. So that part of the surrogacy is completely prohibited because commercial surrogacy has been prohibited. Now, the Union Ministry of Health, Harshvardhan, he's the one who has, he had an entire discussion on this because there was a lot of people who were opposing this ban or prohibition on commercial surrogacy. So he had sessions where he sat and met so many experts, and I was one of them that he invited to give inputs on the Surrogacy Regulation Bill. And he said that he was saying that surrogacy was a thriving, unregulated industry in India, which was posing a threat to poor and disenfranchised women, and who were compelled to become surrogacy mothers, basically to battle poverty. Now, what he was saying is absolutely right, because what I experienced in my field, so I have done one study in 2009, and I did another study in 2019, a follow-up study. And I realized that most of the surrogate mothers that I met, almost all, they were in it because of poverty. They were in it for money. And this was making them vulnerable because these are the women who are poor women. They had a lower education. And because they had lower education, they have lesser employment opportunities and lesser inadequate employment protection. Okay, so that was making their bargaining power in the surrogacy process very, very low. Plus, there was also stories about some of the women who were made to do surrogacy just for buying 2 buffaloes or buying just an extra piece of land. So it was going beyond imagination how women were expected to go through this process just to buy a piece of land, extra piece of land, or a few buffaloes. And because they were, they had a lower educational status, these are the girls who are actually pulled out from schools. They're pulled out from schools into early marriage and their early childbirth. And because they are poor, their their basic health is very, it's of a substandard state, because their nutrition, their health condition, this makes them much more vulnerable to, is making them much more vulnerable to maternal mortality and morbidity. And they were in it for money. So this is a process. This lady in a yellow sari was saying that this process is so distressing that if I had money, I would not do it even if somebody had given me 10 times the money. But now I'm so desperate for the money that I would do it even for a 1/3 amount of money of payment. So this was the extent of motivation, monetary motivation that people were doing surrogacy for. Altruistic surrogacy is presently allowed in India. Now, initially, what some of the ministers were saying that some women are willing to become surrogate mothers. And hence, we are allowing altruistic surrogacy. But as we know, deaths of surrogacy is not reported as much. Okay, these are unreported. There's so many unreported maternal mortalities because of surrogacy. And in this particular case, this is one of the tip of an iceberg, because one particular woman, she died. Her name was Ranjita Lal in 2014. She died out of altruistic surrogacy. So she was coerced to do surrogacy for her elder sister-in-law. She already had a surrogacy. She already had a child of her own. And she was forced to do surrogacy for her sister-in-law. This is a second childbirth. But what had happened is the doctors had told her that you should not go into another pregnancy because you have a cardiac problem, you have a heart problem. but she was coerced into surrogacy and she apparently died during the surrogacy. So my question is that deaths will happen, and this is a high risk pregnancy. We all know that surrogacy pregnancy are of a much higher risk than normal pregnancies. In that case, and if you take this particular case where this woman had died, she was also a victim of dowry abuse. So she was from a poorer family, and hence from within the family, she was forced to do surrogacy for her elder daughter-in-law who was probably richer than her. So what does the act do to provide any kind of safeguard for such women? Because these women are still vulnerable. And this is, as I've always said before also, it is a form of patriarchy, and patriarchy is like very, very embedded and very strong holding. There's a very strong holding of patriarchy in India. Now, in this particular case, she has been forced to do surrogacy and she died. So what are the safeguards that the act can provide for such women? Secondly, it is death. Surrogate mother's death is just a tip of an iceberg. What about all the health problems that women face? So I did my second impact assessment study, and I found that most of the women said that they cannot do work as they used to do before, post surrogacy. So it had reduced their capacity to do normal work than what they used to do before. So their earning capacity had gone down. Their sustainable income that was there had gone down because they cannot go back to the work they were doing before. So these are poor women who were maid servants, working as maids in other people's houses. This was really physical work they were doing, but they cannot do that work anymore because their health has been affected badly. Now, this is the same in altruistic surrogacy or in commercial surrogacy. So what is a safeguard? Their health is still, these women's health is still vulnerable. Now, what does this altruistic surrogacy include? According to the Surrogacy Act in India, it includes no charges that should be given to the surrogate mother, no expenses, no fees, no remuneration or monetary incentive of whatever nature. This is what it doesn't include. Now, what it includes is medical expenses, all prescribed expenses on the surrogate mother. It includes an insurance coverage of 36 months. And these are given to the surrogate mother or to her dependents or her representative. But this doesn't include loss of work. For example, women who might not be able to go back to the work that they used to do before, that is not included in this expenses. Now, one of the questions that I would ask is, can poor people afford this medical expenses? Does this bill or does this act then cater to only the rich people? So again, it reiterates classism in the society. So that is one thing that I wanted to say. Who can avail surrogacy? So the intended couples are those who have a medical indication necessitating gestational surrogacy and who intend to become parents through surrogacy. Now earlier, there was a clause that they have to wait for several years and so on, but that clause has been removed. Now, another thing I wanted to say in the previous slide is that surrogate mothers, earlier it was said that anybody can become surrogate, it was only for relatives. Only relatives can become surrogate mother. But now they have lifted that clause and anybody can become surrogate mother. So that is one clause that has been lifted than what it was earlier. Among the intended parents, they have to show a certificate that they can, they have not been able to have children through a normal process. They also have to show a certificate that they have not been able to adopt a child which is again my input into the Rajya Sabha bill. It is not going to be very easy to do surrogacy in India. So, and I'm quite happy that they included that clause, because I sat at the Parliament House and said that it should not be made easy. So it should not be that anybody can get up, and because at some point I realized that they're not going to ban surrogacy completely. They're going to allow altruistic surrogacy. So my intention was to make it more and more difficult so that it's not easily available to intended couples. So they have included one clause, which is they should show that they have not been able to adopt a child, and they have not been, they tried IVF and it has not worked on themselves. It is only then they can avail surrogacy. Now, other things that has been included in the Surrogacy Act recently is that NRIs have been allowed. Earlier, NRIs, when the draft bill came in 2015, NRIs, non-resident Indians, were not allowed to do surrogacy. And at that point of time, UK citizens were the highest number of clients coming into India for doing surrogacy, intended parents coming into India for surrogacy. There were many people from UK. Now, I was also against that people coming, NRIs coming from abroad, coming and doing surrogacy and taking back the child, it is almost as much traumatic for the surrogate mothers as it is for people coming from abroad. I'm not saying that within the country it is less traumatic, but this should have been curbed, but that has not been curbed. So it actually reiterates classism again, the same thing. So this is one of the loophole and one of the disadvantages I see in the Surrogacy Act that is there. One very interesting thing has been included, who can avail surrogacy, not allowed surrogacy, who can avail surrogacy. It is intended woman. So a widow or a divorcee has been allowed to avail surrogacy in India from between the age group 35 and 45. Now, I very strongly feel that this is reinforcing patriarchal stereotypes of motherhood. So this is a clause that was not there before. And in the course of discussions of the about the bill, this has been added, and widows have been allowed. And I have a very strong contention that widows in the family might be coerced to sign a surrogacy contract, because there is a punishment now. There is a punishment not only of fine, but also for jailing. You have to, there is a punishment for imprisonment for 5 years or for even more, 10 years for second offense. So I have a very strong feeling that this is putting women who are widows in families, making them vulnerable and putting their, life at risk by inclusion of this particular clause. And divorcees have also been included. And this is also for people whose husband dies. So there might be families who might force these widows to actually go for surrogacy after their husband has died. So those kind of clauses, which I find is very, very problematic. And I would like to quote Janice Raymond's, from her book, Women as Wombs. Women feel pressured to try these technologies simply because it exists. So these are, by adding this intended woman as one of the kind of individuals who can access surrogacy, it is reinforcing this pressure that women have to use the technology. And the words that are given by the society, people are told, have you thought about adoption or IVF or surrogacy, as though simply getting a child somehow will solve the entire problem of childlessness. But it's from a feminist perspective, it is a very inbuilt patriarchy that plays into the what defines motherhood, and why there's a pressure on women to become a mother. So who can be a surrogate mother? Earlier, as I told you, there is a discussion about allowing relatives to become surrogacy, but now there's a restriction on that. That restriction has been lifted. So right now, surrogate mothers means a woman who agrees to bear a child through surrogacy for implantation of embryo into her womb, and she has to give back the child at the end of the surrogacy. So she's not allowed traditional surrogacy. It is a gestational surrogacy. So married women having her own child of age 25 to 35, and she can be a surrogate mother only once. So this is the clause that are there in the Surrogacy Act. But these are things that are that will be very, very difficult to, what is the English word? To regulate. It will be very difficult to regulate this. How many times a surrogate mother is, a woman is becoming a surrogate mother. Of course, the Act also says that there's going to be a surrogacy board. So we have to wait and see how effective those boards are and whether they will be registering these surrogate mothers effectively. Punishment, there is a punishment for this. First offense is imprisonment for a term of 5 years and fine of 5 lakhs. And the second offense is imprisonment for 10 years and fine of 10 lakhs. Now, this again, as I had told earlier, because there are widows involved, I have a very strong concern that this might be putting widows and divorcees into problems. Now, the previous concerns like exploitation of women who are detained in surrogate homes, this has not been addressed at all in the new Surrogacy Act. So whether these women will be retained in homes, whether they will have restrictions of movement, food, all that problems that were there earlier. They were asked to breastfeed. Some surrogate mothers were asked to breastfeed their the babies after birth. Some were asked to do nanny care, give nanny care, and this was going on until a few months after surrogacy. So we do not know, and this particular clause has not been addressed at all in the new Act. And in my follow-up study, I also had seen women being chosen for their fair skin. So this particular woman in my follow-up study was chosen to be a surrogate mother only because she had a fairer skin. So how far can such a bill, such an act that allows altruistic surrogacy curb something like this form of racism that is there in the surrogacy markets? Sex-selective abortions was rampant that I found in the 2019 follow-up study. So there was this lady in this green dress standing next to me, and she was selective, in utero selective abortions was done on her. And in the process, she lost all her babies because there's a risk that is involved in that procedure. And selectively, they had aborted one girl child that she had. She was carrying 2 boys and a girl, and that girl child had been aborted in utero. And this happened in 2019. And that's not very far away. The lady in the black, she was also asked to abort. She was carrying 2 children and she was asked to abort 1 child because that was not the sex that the intended parents wanted to have. So according to the ART bill, Assisted Reproductive Technology Bill, so there were 2 acts that were passed simultaneously. One is the Assisted Reproductive Technology Act and one is the Surrogacy Regulation Act. According to the ART Act, it clearly says that pre-implantation, genetic diagnostics, sex determination, sex-selective abortion will be prohibited as it is in the Indian law, but as it is in the PCP&DT Act. but Prenatal Diagnostic Testing Act. But how far can this be controlled? Because IVF technology is used sometimes specifically only for sex-selective abortions. So it's very difficult to regulate and try to, control this kind of sex determination and sex-selective abortions that is going on inside the laboratories, in the clinics. So this is one a kind of dangerous loophole that is there in the entire ART program, and specifically because surrogacy is allowed, it's very difficult to control whether this is happening in the altruistic surrogacy. I would like to address one of the assumptions that people commonly bring out, is assumption that now that the commercial surrogacy is banned, this is going to go underground. And from my experience, when I had gone in 2019, 2015 bill was already on the table. So we all knew that this is coming up, and the clinics were already in a slump. The entire market was in a slump. This is my own experience at what I have seen. Neither the doctors nor the surrogate mothers were willing to indulge in any kind of illegal surrogacy. And 60% of the surrogacies at that point of time, 60% is a huge proportion. 60% of the surrogacies that was being commissioned in Anand and Ahmedabad was from abroad, intended parents coming from abroad. And women themselves have realized. So this was an area, Anand is an area where this initial hub. So this area is a place where surrogacy started very early in 2005. Surrogacy had started mushrooming in this area in a big way. And when I went in 2019, what I observed was surrogate mothers themselves had realized that this was causing a great deal of health risk. It was causing a great deal of health risk on their bodies. And they realized that it was not worth the money that was coming in. So many women themselves had started telling me that we did a mistake by doing this. It has actually destroyed our health and well-being. So that realization was there among surrogate mothers. And see, this was all a market. So people know that the dollars and euros have stopped coming in. So that interest that was there in the transnational, commercial surrogacy, it was going on. That kind of interest is not there anymore, because what was happening was a big international transnational market that was going on there. That has slumped down in a big way. I would like to bring analogies with sex selective abortion, because we have also a ban on sex determination and sex selective abortions. Earlier, before the prohibition of sex selection, there were 50 doctors who were doing it. Now there are only 5 doctors who may be doing it. So it is reduced to a great extent, and that is similarly what has happened to the surrogate. There might be people, because altruistic surrogacy is allowed, certainly there will be people who would do it, but not to the extent that was happening earlier. And also the exploitation that was happening, the extent of exploitation that was happening earlier will not happen now, because earlier women were being trafficked into surrogacy from surrounding areas of Delhi along the Gangetic Plain. This is the traditional areas where women were being trafficked for working as housemaids and as prostitution. In big cities, surrogacy was just an activity that got added to that chain of networks. Now, this sort of activity will not happen because people do not want to indulge into illegal activities, and since there is imprisonment and fine as well, people would not want to indulge in this kind of trafficking, because there is money involved, but not big money involved. So that is what they are looking at it from a business perspective. So for example, this lady said they treated me like a money minting machine. My will never mattered to them. All they wanted was to deliver babies, and they were raped and enslaved and traded, and then their babies were sold. So that extent of activities was going on. This will certainly be curbed with the new surrogacy bill, as what I strongly have observed. Because when I went for doing my impact assessment study, already there was a slump because they knew the commercial surrogacy is going to be banned soon. The bill was already there. That means when the bill is there, that means it's almost implemented. So I would like to end my talk by saying that, coming back to the point that it is a reproductive injustice. Surrogacy itself is a reproductive injustice, and hence it should not be allowed. And as I've written in my book as well, women who face infertility, we know that women are facing double burden of infertility. So they carry the burden not only of themselves, but also of their the male counterparts. So 1/3 of women are infertile because of male factor, 1/3 is because of female factor, and women are carrying the entire burden because all the treatment happens in their bodies. It's IVF treatment and all kind of correction, so-called, is conducted on their body. That's what it happens. So they face social stigma, they face psychological problems, physical stress because of the infertility treatment, because of repeated trials and the hormone injections and medicines impacts also their psychological health, because they also they face depression. Depression is one of the results of this IVF treatments. Hence, there is there's a violation of their bodily integrity. But by taking up surrogacy as an activity, they are putting other women through the same set of problems, the social stigma, psychological challenges, violation of her bodily integrity, but they're also putting additional risk on the surrogate mothers, on her health, on her freedom, on her liberty, and even on her health, on her life, which is at stake. And hence, I strongly think that altruistic surrogacy also should be completely shut down in India. And it is only then that women who get exploited and coerced into surrogacy using the name of altruism can actually come up and register their cases, because otherwise they will not be able to come up and register their cases to register that this is an injustice against their bodily integrity. So thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you so much, Sheela. It was so informative, and I have a lot of burning questions. So keep your question. You will be we will have a short question time for the end. Our next panelist is Elizabeth Purslow. She's been a midwife for 20 years and also an NHS nurse. And she's involved with two organizations in the UK, is Stop Surrogacy Now and Nordic Model Now. So thank you so much, Liz, and welcome.
Hello, thank you. Thank you for inviting me to take part, and good evening, everyone. In the UK, the Law Commission, there are plans for new laws relating to surrogacy. The official position is the government supports surrogacy as a range of assisted conception options. In June 2019, the Law Commission published a public consultation, which ran until October that year. And this was accompanied by a 500-page document with 118 questions explaining their proposals. They also held 10 public events, giving people an opportunity to discuss their proposals and ask questions about them. So there was a huge response with over 750 written replies to the consultation paper, as well as other submissions by email and formal letters from organisations and members of the public. The responses are being analysed, and it's expected the Law Commission will present their report and a draft bill for the new laws in autumn 2022 this year. Just to give some background, if I go back in time before the consultation, next slide, please. So in July 2016, the Law Commission launched the 13th programme of law reform to seek public's views on the issues and areas of law most in need of reform. It's not really a public consultation because although the public could respond, it was advertised to interested parties and law firms and so on, and most people didn't know about it. But the consultation received the largest ever volume of responses, with over 1,300 submissions covering 222 different topics. Following 343 submissions to lobby for reform of the laws relating to surrogacy, and after they obtained approval and funding from the Department of Health and Social Care, surrogacy was added to that programme for reform. Those submissions were almost all from organisations and individuals with a vested interest in surrogacy, so law firms, fertility experts, surrogate mothers and commissioning parents, saying the current law was not fit for purpose and lobbying for reform. And nobody else knew that was happening. So next slide, please. So currently in the UK, the law originates from the Surrogacy Arrangements Act of 1985. And there are further changes created by HFEA Acts of 1990 and 2008. The HFEA, that's the Human Fertilisation and Embryology Authority. So the 1985 Act was a bit rushed in. It followed the case of Kim Cotton, and she contracted to have a baby for an American couple in exchange for £6,500, and there was much public condemnation of that. So there was a determination to ban commercial surrogacy, but there was a feeling that some surrogacy would happen anyway. So instead of a total ban, we had altruistic surrogacy allowed under certain conditions. It created criminal offences in relation to commercial surrogacy. And so commercial agencies and brokers are banned, and it's illegal to advertise for a surrogate mother or for a woman to advertise her services. And any payment has to be for reasonable expenses only. So the law established that the surrogate mother is always the legal mother at birth. Over the years, there have been various changes, mostly regarding the scope of who can be a commissioning parent. So initially, only the married opposite-sex couples could apply for a parental order. Same-sex couples, civil partners, and couples in an enduring family relationship were allowed in 2010. And in 2019, single people also became eligible. The main conditions of the law today are that surrogacy remains altruistic, with only reasonable expenses allowed to be paid. Surrogacy contracts are unenforceable, and the ban on advertising and commercial brokering remains. The surrogate mother is the legal mother when the baby is born, and if she's married, the husband will usually be considered the legal father unless he formally opts out. A parental order must be applied for in order for the commissioning parents to obtain legal parenthood, and they have to apply for that no sooner than 6 weeks after the birth and within 6 months. And next slide, please. So the numbers engaging in surrogacy in the UK remain small, but they have been increasing. Because we don't have a central register, it's hard to know the exact figures because surrogate births aren't recorded and statistics are gathered from various sources. But the best indication comes from the number of parental orders applied for. And that has gone up from 67 in 2008 to 323 in 2017. And in 2020, there were 430 applications for a parental order. Of those, about half will be surrogacy undertaken abroad, mostly in America. So that's international surrogacy arrangements. So the numbers of UK surrogacy arrangements is still quite low. Next slide, please. So the data from surrogacy organisations shows there's been a significant increase in the number of male same-sex couples in recent years. Both COTS, which is one of the groups, and Brilliant Beginnings reported that 50% of their commissioning parents are same-sex couples. Since 2018, there have been 350 parental order applications from couples in same-sex relationships, and there's been a sharp rise in applications, up from 69 in 2013 to 139 applications in 2019 to 20. Single parent applications are also increasing. So in 2019, the first year that single parent surrogacy was legal in the UK, there were 38 applications. Next slide, please. So there's two types of surrogacy, traditional and gestational. Now, most countries that allow commercial surrogacy, nearly all surrogate pregnancies are gestational. So that's where the surrogate mother is not genetically related to the baby and has been implanted with an embryo created from either a donor egg or an egg from the commissioning mother. And it's felt that surrogate mothers prefer not to be related to the baby, as this helps her to feel disconnected to the baby that isn't hers. And commissioning parents also want to separate the mother from the baby to protect their rights. But in the UK, there is quite a significant proportion of surrogacy that is traditional, and that's using the surrogate mother's egg. And that seems to be about 1/3 of surrogacy arrangements overall. Surrogate mothers like this because they can self-inseminate at home and don't have to go through the process of IVF. And commissioning parents like it because there's considerable financial saving if they don't use IVF. And also in the UK, there's quite a substantial community of independent surrogate mothers. So Hope Surrogacy Support Service, which is a group that supports this, they shared some data. In 2017, they had 33 surrogate births, and in 2018, another 28 babies on the list. Now, these independent arrangements, they will have involved surrogate mothers and commissioning parents making contact, perhaps over the internet via social media such as Facebook, and making informal arrangements with insemination being done at home. These are really risky arrangements, legally, medically, and also for the babies because there's no safeguarding. Next slide, please. So these are two examples of cases that went wrong, and they're both informal arrangements and just demonstrate how badly things can go wrong. So the first was a post that was on the Mumsnet forum. This surrogate mother, she had entered into an informal arrangement with two gay friends. And about a week or so before the baby was due, her friend, who was the father of the baby, explained that he and his partner were splitting up. He was going to move back in with his mother, whose home was an unsuitable environment for a baby. So he asked the surrogate mother to keep the baby for a few months until he sorted himself out. Although this poster never updated the final outcome, she seemed to have decided she couldn't give up the baby she had cared for over a period of months. And she was very definite that ultimately she was responsible for the welfare of this baby. And so she was planning to keep the baby herself, with the possibility of some future access arrangement for the father. She was a single mother, just sorting herself out financially and with a new job, and she hadn't planned to become a mother to another child at that stage in her life. And she was really upset with how the father had so little understanding of the needs of the baby and her needs as a mother. The other case was a case that came to court, Baby Z, and it involves another gay couple who made contact with a surrogate mother over Facebook. After just one meeting, they presented the surrogate mother with a typed commercial surrogacy agreement they had found on the internet. It turned out the surrogate mother had learning difficulties. She was extremely suggestible and vulnerable. She had not been able to read or understand the agreement and had not understood the gravity or the reality of what she had agreed to do. When the surrogate mother decided to keep the baby, the case ended up in court. And it turned out the couple already had twins by another woman with whom the relationship had completely broken down. And as soon as they got those twins, they started looking and organised this new arrangement. The couple were really heavily criticised by the judge. And the judge made an order that the baby should remain living with the surrogate mother with occasional contact with the commissioning parents. Next slide, please. The Law Commission consultation document was extensive, 500 pages, and it approached the issue from a very transactional standpoint. And that's not altogether surprising, considering the senior commissioner, Professor Nick Hopkins, is a property law specialist. The key proposal is to change the process of obtaining legal parenthood with the introduction of a new pathway, which will enable commissioning parents to become the legal parents at birth. There will be certain conditions to be met. Surrogacy will remain altruistic, and contracts will not be legally binding. Next slide, please. So this proposal regarding the legal parentage is in direct contradiction to the report of the United Nations Special Rapporteur, who recommends safeguards for the protection of the rights of children and prevention of sale of children. Specifically, she states, in all parentage and parental responsibility decisions involving a surrogacy arrangement, a court competent authority makes a post-birth best interests of child determination. As well as flying in the face of recommendations from such a body as the United Nations, this proposal is also against the advice of CAFCAS. This is the Children and Family Court Advisory and Support Service in the UK, and they represent the child in court. They normally appoint a parental order reporter who is the fully qualified social worker who will investigate the circumstances of the case and consider the child's best interest and ensure that the surrogate mother continues to consent freely and unconditionally. So they provide very important protections to both the child and the surrogate mother. Their submission to the Law Commission stated, "We believe the current legislation on legal parenthood and post-birth parental orders should remain. The parental order process takes place after birth and involves qualified social work assessments in order to provide a valuable safeguard for the best interests of the child, as well as protection against potential exploitation of the surrogate mother or the commissioning parents. Removing this post-birth parental order process and giving parental rights at birth as proposed eradicates those safeguards. The Law Commission recommend that surrogacy should be contracted through registered non-profit agencies, and there should be counselling and so-called light touch checks on the commissioning parents and also the surrogate mother. And those amount to little more than a criminal records check. And that compares to the full social work check that CAFCAS would do. Next slide, please. There's also a broader issue of language and status of a woman who has given birth in law. In the case of Freddie McConnell, this was a trans man who went to court to try to be registered as the father of the baby that Freddie had given birth to. And the judge concluded a person who becomes pregnant and gives birth to a child is that child's mother. The state of pregnancy and maternity are protected characteristics under the Equality Act of 2010 in the UK. So I ask, if a woman who has given birth is not afforded the legal status of mother, will this have possible implications for all women and mothers and protected characteristic of maternity? Next slide, please. So other key proposals include lifting the current ban on advertising relating to surrogacy. In the USA, young women are targeted with tempting advertisements extolling the joy of making dreams come true, to help a family have a precious gift, and also, of course, money, generous compensation up to $60,000. With a suggested minimum age of just 18 years, young women in the UK are at risk of being sucked into surrogacy without understanding the implications. There's also no requirement that a surrogate mother should already have previously given birth at least once. I don't believe it's possible to give informed consent to surrogacy if a woman has had no prior experience or knowledge of childbirth and motherhood. And it's shocking to think that teenagers just out of school could become surrogate mothers if this law goes through. Next slide, please. So while the Law Commission state that surrogacy will continue to be altruistic with no payment, only reasonable expenses to the surrogate mother, it's clear that the interpretation of expenses is generous, if not imaginative. It's accepted in reality there's a going rate, which is somewhere around £15,000. From their research, the median payment was £14,795, and 5 cases involved payment over £20,000. In fact, there's plenty of evidence that surrogate mothers enter into surrogacy for financial reasons. As far back as 1994, a study of 19 surrogate mothers found that financial motives were usually present. One woman explained that surrogacy provided an escape from the poverty trap by funding a higher education course and the hope of more socially acceptable employment prospects. And another said, I needed some money and it seemed an easy way to gain a large sum. And Kafkas noted, our experience in parental order cases show that the rules around reasonable expenses paid to surrogate mothers are unclear, and expenses outside of the criteria are frequently retrospectively authorised by the court. These are often based on the normal commercial amounts paid in international surrogacy arrangements. Next slide, please. So the Law Commission did not propose any limits on the number of times a woman can be a surrogate mother, despite the well-documented risks that accompany high parity, that's giving birth more than 5 times, especially when births are close together. In the UK, we've seen some serial surrogate mothers who do this many times. So published cases include those of Carol Horlock, who had 13 surrogate babies, in addition to owning 2 children, so 15 babies in total. And Jill Hawkins had 10 surrogate babies, including twins born when she was 48, after a serious hemorrhage at 35 weeks gestation. She has a long history of depression, including a previous suicide attempt and other health problems, but still carried on doing surrogacy. Next slide, please. So in January 2021, the Times newspaper carried this story of a woman having her 7th surrogate baby. She also had 2 children of her own, so that made this her 9th birth in total. She stated she would be paid £15,000 in expenses. And despite nearly dying during her 5th surrogate birth, when she needed intensive care and a transfusion of 4 litres of blood, she carried on to have 2 more. So the 7th pregnancy was embarked on just 6 months after the 6th surrogate baby had been delivered in December 2019. So she became pregnant probably about July 2020, in the middle of the pandemic also. The World Health Organization recommends a gap of 2 years between babies, and this woman has had 7 surrogate babies in 8 years. I was really furious about it, so I contacted the HFEA about this case and asked them to investigate, as I think she's been recklessly exposed to risk by the fertility clinic, not ensuring she had a proper recovery time between babies. As a result of this, I was contacted by the Chief Inspector of the HFEA, and we had a long conversation about the issues the case raised. The inspector explained the HFEA can only regulate surrogacy within the confines of the law. Meanwhile, the then Minister of Health, Matt Hancock, who I had contacted, assured me that surrogacy is regulated by the HFEA. This means there's a circle of responsibility. It means that unless limits on the number of surrogacies that women can undertake are enshrined in law, there will be no protections for women undertaking this. Next slide, please. So question 79 of the consultation considers the matter of compensation for excessive hemorrhage and hysterectomy and other problems. It states the surrogacy agreement might provide for additional fixed payments to the surrogate for multiple births, a cesarean section, where a surrogate has had to undergo medical procedures such as a hysterectomy. And question 80 invited views regarding compensation if the surrogate died. The casual nature of this brief mention demonstrates a complete lack of understanding of the serious risks and trauma these women will be exposed to, especially if they do it multiple times. Next slide, please. So in the UK, we're a country of dog lovers, and it's worth noting dogs have more protection in law than anyone is proposing for women engaging in surrogacy. Licensed dog breeders are restricted in order to protect the female dog from pain, suffering, injury, and disease. As such, they may not breed from any bitch aged less than 12 months. The dog may not give birth to more than 1 litter of puppies in a 12-month period, and they may not breed more than 6 litters of puppies in total. And also, she may not be used if she has had 2 litters delivered by cesarean section. So that's dogs, not women. Okay, next slide, please. Demands for fertility equality seem to ignore the exploitation of women that is entailed in providing access to babies via the reproductive labour of women. Surrogacy UK, in their second report, Further Evidence for Reform, have stated aims which include public funding should be made available for surrogacy related to fertility treatment in the UK and to pay surrogate expenses. This appears to mean they believe the NHS should pay all costs related to surrogacy, including paying a woman to put her own health and well-being at risk in order to gestate a baby for commissioning parents. In fact, this is already happening in Scotland. In 2020, the first gay couple to get access to fertility treatment on the Scottish NHS spoke of their joy. In the news article, they stated, the NHS has done everything from start to finish pretty much. That's semen analysis, retrieving the eggs and transferring the embryo. And meanwhile, for those who can afford to pay, there are no limits. In 2016, it was reported that a gay couple paid 3 surrogate mothers they met on the internet more than £40,000 in total to give birth to 3 babies in less than 6 months. Despite many concerns and criticisms from a judge who said the couple were dishonest and reprehensible, and condemnation for trying to conceal how much they paid the surrogate mothers, they were awarded parental responsibility for these 3 children. Surrogacy is sold as the ultimate gift of love and one of the most emotionally fulfilling experiences you will ever have. But the reward for this love is to be treated as one of a herd of cattle. Next slide, please. The Law Commission planned to present a draft bill to Parliament, so that will be autumn this year, and we await with interest to see if they have taken on board any of the robust criticisms of their proposals that they have received among the responses to the consultation. I'm with Stop Surrogacy Now and Nordic Model Now, and we're trying to raise public awareness of the proposals. I've only talked about a few. Remember, there were 118 questions. We're contacting members of Parliament and preparing to campaign against this bill. We do this for the protection of the dignity, health and rights of women and the human rights of babies, not to be treated as commodities to be purchased to order. Thank you so much for your time. Goodbye.
Thank you so much, Liz. It was so detailed and really one could get really lost in the detail. I can only stress so much when we have similar issue here in Quebec with what happened post-birth and also with public funding of surrogacy. Our next panelist will be Berta Garcia, and she's president of ICASM and RECAV. Spokesperson from Spain. She will delve into the underworld of surrogacy and show us the links between the reproductive exploitation mafia. So reproductive exploitation is a term we now use also here because it encompasses all the aspects of surrogacy.
Bueno, voy a hablar de mafia y surrogacy. Como todas sabemos, ni siquiera una guerra fue nunca un obstáculo para ejercer violencia contra las mujeres. Un territorio en guerra es, por excelencia, un territorio multiplicador de mafias proxenetas y mafias reproductivas. Según dijo muy bien y muy escuetamente Nora Villar, del Front Abolicionista del País Valencià. En foros de internet ya están reclamando vídeos de violaciones a ucranianas y los proxenetas alemanes hacen el agosto reclutando mujeres para sus burdeles, tanto en la frontera con Polonia como en el mismo Berlín, a donde llegan miles de mujeres jóvenes que huyen de Ucrania. Diversas ONGs alertan que también se está intentando captar en las fronteras de Ucrania a madres jóvenes que huyen con sus hijos. Las agencias de vientres de alquiler, por su parte, siguen ofreciendo donantes de óvulos y gestantes ucranianas en otros países, al tiempo que los mercados de seres humanos se consolidan allí donde ya existían y buscan diversificar la oferta, desplazándose a Colombia, Argentina, México, Laos, Nigeria, Rumanía, Albania, a Tailandia, que pretende volver a legalizar, a Dubái, República Checa, Chipre, Arabia Saudí y Filipinas. Nos damos cuenta de la dimensión de este negocio en el mundo. Los escándalos y denuncias de trata de mujeres y venta y tráfico de recién nacidos no son recientes. El propietario de Biotexcom, después de años de investigación, fue acusado de delitos de trata y tráfico de personas, falsificación de documentos y fraude fiscal en 2018. Pero cayeron sucesivamente 3 fiscales encargados del caso y Alberto Chilovsky nunca fue condenado. Mientras que en 2019 decenas de madres gestantes para una red que operaba en Camboya se vieron obligadas a quedarse con los bebés que estaban gestando y conformarse con la libertad provisional para evitar ser condenadas a penas de hasta 20 años de cárcel por tráfico de menores. En 2020, el vídeo de los bebés almacenados en el Hotel Venice, propiedad de Biotexcom, dio la vuelta al mundo. Y no eran los únicos. Otros bebés nacidos durante la pandemia para otras clínicas y agencias no tan potentes como Fertility estaban alojados en casas de particulares. Bebés apátridas, sin registrar, discriminados y víctimas del propio Estado ucraniano, que se lavó las manos en su deber de protección y tutela para no interferir en la entrega de esos bebés a sus compradores, lo que llevó al defensor del menor Mykola Kuleva a proponer la prohibición de la gestación subrogada en Ucrania por violar los derechos de los niños y las niñas. También por esas fechas se descubrió una red que operaba en Ucrania, ofreciendo matrimonios simulados con ucranianas y venta de bebés a ciudadanos chinos de una cierta orientación. Así fueron calificados por los propios medios ucranianos, no por mí. La red fue desarticulada en el verano de 2021 y se calcula que fueron decenas de bebés vendidos por esa red dirigida por médicos. Según el jefe de la Policía Nacional de Ucrania, existe una línea muy delgada entre los servicios de gestación subrogada y la trata de menores. Pero curiosamente, allí solo se considera trata de menores si quienes los compran son parejas homosexuales u hombres solos. Cuando los compradores son parejas heterosexuales y casadas, la explotación reproductiva de las ucranianas y la venta de menores es alentada por el Estado debido a las divisas que proporciona. También en el verano de 2021 se descubrió una red clandestina de clínicas de subrogación en China y a finales de ese mismo año se descubrió otra red que operaba en la República Checa con madres gestantes ucranianas que daban a luz a bebés para ser vendidos en el extranjero, con lo que los organizadores del plan, dueños de una clínica privada, ganaron más de 1 millón de euros en 3 años. Todos estos, solo por ceñirme a algunos de los más recientes, fueron casos que saltaron a los medios y que se resolvieron con mayor o menor éxito, o con ninguno, como el caso del dueño de Biotexcom, que se libró y se fue de rositas de todas las acusaciones. Pero hay miles de casos que están ocurriendo ahora mismo y que nunca verán la luz. Recientemente publiqué una entrevista que hice a un explotador reproductivo que fue víctima, entre comillas, de fraude por la agencia My Donor Cycle, propiedad de Lily Frost de San Diego, California, y me contó cosas espeluznantes. Después de haber estudiado varias opciones en México y Colombia, este señor se decidió por fin por un programa en México que incluía 2 donantes de óvulos, fecundaciones in vitro ilimitadas, 2 mujeres gestantes y 2 bebés. Él solo tenía que ir después de los partos a recoger a los bebés. Como la agencia le robó $125.000, denunció el caso al FBI y quiso contarme lo que había vivido y otras cosas que conocía de primera mano. Pero estoy segura de que nunca lo habría hecho de haber conseguido sus objetivos. Este hombre viajó a Guadalajara, donde la gestación subrogada no es legal, pero se opera en la mayor impunidad, como en tantas ciudades de México. Y allí se enteró de lo que estaba haciendo la agencia con la que había contratado. con consecuencias vitales catastróficas para las madres gestantes y los recién nacidos. Me narró el caso de una gestante que fue a un hospital de Cancún a dar a luz a un bebé para una pareja de alemanes y allí le dijeron que no la aceptaban porque los gastos de hospital no estaban pagados por la clínica. Es decir, el dinero se lo había gastado la dueña de la clínica, de la agencia, perdón, y sus secuaces. La mujer salió del hospital para llamar por teléfono a la agencia y aclarar qué estaba pasando, pero terminó dando a luz en la calle sin asistencia médica y el bebé murió. También por haber gastado el dinero para el hospital, una mujer fue enviada a dar a luz en un cuartucho inmundo, en un callejón que no contaba con el más elemental equipamiento, y a resultas de las malas condiciones en las que tuvo lugar el parto, la niña sobrevivió, pero tiene hemiplegia, la mitad del cuerpo paralizado. Quiero aclarar que quienes se gastaban el dinero eran la dueña de la agencia y sus secuaces, no las madres. Otro caso que él conoció fue el de una mujer mexicana reclutada para un programa cross-border, trasladada a San Diego, y una vez que dio a luz no recibió ningún pago ni le proporcionaron el vuelo de vuelta a México, por lo que se quedó tirada en California y con la deuda del hospital a sus espaldas. Y esto es frecuente que ocurra, ya que la madre gestante ingresa con su nombre en el hospital y una vez que indica que ella no es la madre del bebé que acaba de parir, llegan los clientes con el contrato y la sentencia judicial de parentalidad debajo del brazo y les entregan el bebé, pero no tienen ninguna responsabilidad en la deuda contraída con el hospital y se la dejan a la madre. La misma agencia de gestación subrogada le ofreció a este hombre comprar un bebé ya nacido y fabricarle los papeles para el registro, cosa que ocurre muy frecuentemente, como os pondré más adelante. Me contó casos de compradores que cambian de opinión y abandonan a las mujeres en estado de gestación muy avanzado y sin tener ya opción a abortar. Casos de abandono de bebés ya nacidos con problemas de salud, mujeres infectadas por VIH, mujeres obligadas a vivir con el feto muerto dentro de ellas hasta que revienten, porque la agencia no quiere gastar el dinero en una intervención. En este mundo aparentemente respetable, aséptico y color pastel de las agencias de vientres de alquiler, se mueve una mafia muy poderosa que opera sobre todo en Facebook y WhatsApp. Lo que encontramos en esos grupos es un mercado de carne cruda que se ampara unas veces en la legalidad y otras en la pasividad de los estados frente al crimen organizado, la corrupción de sus instituciones y el laissez-faire de Mark Zuckerberg, el dueño de ambas plataformas. Allí se ofrecen personas que operan dentro de los registros civiles y que explican con claridad las artimañas que llevan a cabo para generar actas de nacimiento con datos falsificados. Son innumerables las entradas en Facebook con ofertas a mujeres para ser transportadas a otros países. Buscan a mujeres en todo el mundo para ser trasladadas a cualquier parte del planeta, a países donde la gestación subrogada es legal o se tolera, pero también a países donde está prohibida. Buscan mujeres mexicanas para programas cross-border entre México y Estados Unidos, ya que la remuneración que recibe la gestante mexicana es significativamente inferior a la que cobra una californiana, por ejemplo. Reclutan mujeres para ser trasladadas a Canadá, a España, a Argentina, a Alemania, a cambio de cantidades irrisorias, entre 1.600 y 3.000 euros por todo el proceso del embarazo, el parto y la entrega del bebé, ya que existe una evidente guerra de precios y las mujeres muy necesitadas aceptan cualquier retribución. Los mismos que después hablarán de sus gestantes como seres maravillosos, hadas, ángeles, regatean precios a las mujeres y en cambio no se atreven a regatear un céntimo a las agencias de vientres de alquiler. Buscan mujeres en Camboya para pasar el embarazo en India. buscan mujeres en la República Checa para ser trasladadas a Alemania y a ucranianas para ser trasladadas a la República Checa, a Chipre, a Polonia, a Kazajistán o a Bruselas, en el mismo corazón de Europa. Buscan mujeres para ser trasladadas a Gran Bretaña, a Pakistán. Cuando esas clínicas tan prestigiosas ofrecen madres gestantes ucranianas o mexicanas y parto de luxe en Estados Unidos, Portugal, Holanda, Bélgica, Canadá, Grecia, República Checa, Reino Unido, las mujeres no salen de la nada. Son reclutadas muchas veces en las redes sociales, donde se cuelgan reclamos a diario. Pero que no se nos escape un detalle, esas mujeres que ofertan las agencias son llevadas muchas veces a países donde teóricamente la gestación subrogada es altruista, porque quien hace la ley hace la trampa y obviamente necesitan mujeres a las que pagar porque no encuentran allí mujeres que altruistamente lo hagan para ellos. Y ninguna de esas mujeres regresa al grupo para comentar cómo fue su experiencia en el extranjero, y de sobra es sabido que muchas no reciben la cantidad de dinero acordada o no son pagadas, y que incluso se quedan abandonadas en el país de destino y a sus espaldas la deuda contraída en el hospital. Se pierde el rastro de muchas de ellas. Como ocurre con la explotación sexual, no hay país en el mundo que esté libre de trata de mujeres con fines de explotación reproductiva. Existen también mujeres que entran en esos grupos para ofrecerse como gestantes en cualquier país del mundo con el fin de escapar de la pobreza. Sudafricanas, venezolanas, brasileñas, nigerianas, peruanas, mujeres de cualquier nacionalidad en la ruina más total y absoluta, dispuestas a cualquier cosa con tal de sobrevivir ellas mismas y sus hijas e hijos, aunque solo sea a cambio de salir del país. Proliferan anuncios de agencias que practican el llamado modelo tradicional, que consiste en inseminar a una mujer que aporta sus propios óvulos para dar a luz un bebé que será entregado a otras personas. Es obviamente, como decíamos antes, un procedimiento que abarata el precio, ya que se ahorra el coste de los ovocitos, la fecundación in vitro y el implante de embriones. Recientemente, una de esas clínicas de Filipinas publicó un post diciendo que una mujer estaba ya embarazada, pero que el padre intencional, y esto entre comillas, porque a mí me da, yo prefiero llamar a estas personas explotadores o compradores, padres no tienen nada. Bien, que ese padre intencional, o sea, explotador, comprador, no había vuelto a dar señales de vida en 3 meses, y la propia agencia ofrece a esa mujer embarazada a quien quiera continuar el viaje. Una agencia de Estados Unidos oferta a mujeres gestantes para ser trasladadas a Gran Bretaña y que la sanidad pública se haga cargo de su atención durante el embarazo y en el parto, de altísimo riesgo vital, ya que las características de estas mujeres de hasta 45 años y con 5 cesáreas en su cuerpo no cumplen los requisitos exigidos a las gestantes en USA. He visto a una mujer buscando la compra más económica de 20 bebés por gestación subrogada en Ciudad de México. Aterroriza pensar para quién y para qué fin estarán destinados esos 20 bebés comprados al por mayor. Pero también he visto a esa misma persona ofrecer la venta de un bebé por foto a cambio de unos 2.200 euros, de un bebé de unos 10 meses. ¿Te gusta este? Sí. ¿Cuánto? 50.000 pesos. Es tuyo. También hay personas de todas las nacionalidades demandando menores en adopción y arreglos con las madres de bebés ya nacidos o por nacer, es decir, demandando menores en venta. He visto con mis propios ojos cómo se expone con todo lujo de detalles en Facebook la venta de una bebé a una pareja que luego se retracta y decide no hacerse cargo de la niña después de haber pagado a su madre por ella y de tener a su disposición los documentos falsificados, expuestos con nombres y apellidos a la vista de quien los quiera mirar. He visto a una mujer contar que la señora para la que estaba gestando la despidió y que ahora embarazada ya de 20 semanas, se encuentra con que tiene que hacerse cargo de otro bebé y con que la agencia se niega a proporcionarle datos de la cliente para exigirle responsabilidades. La he visto ofrecer a la criatura en adopción, es decir, en venta cuando nazca. He visto cómo una madre gestante contaba que tuvo que quedarse con 2 bebés porque nacieron enfermos y los compradores no quisieron hacerse cargo de ellos. Vi cómo era amedrentada por 2 administradores del grupo de Facebook que inmediatamente borraron el post y todos los comentarios. Y ahora sé que esa mujer está amenazada para que no hable. Por eso tenemos que hablar nosotras, compañeras. Recientemente, una reclutadora de mujeres narraba el caso de 2 mujeres que estaban siendo embarazadas por encargo con una diferencia de 3 semanas para la misma pareja. Que esa pareja encontró un bebé ya nacido en adopción, seguramente comprado, y las había dejado a ambas en la estacada, encontrándose en ese momento en poder de la agencia. Bien, no se hicieron esperar las ofertas para adoptar a esos bebés en cuanto nacieran. Adoptar se quiere decir comprar, cuando todo el mundo sabe que una adopción legal va por otros cauces. Pero evidentemente las mafias funcionan para hacer que todos los deseos se hagan realidad a cambio de dinero. ¿Alguien cree todavía que la legalización de la gestación subrogada para garantizar, según dicen sus defensores, los derechos de todas las partes, es capaz de disuadir a una mafia sólidamente asentada y en constante expansión? ¿No sabemos ya que la explotación sexual y reproductiva, allí donde se ha regulado, solo ha servido para atraer a más mafia y ha redundado en más trata, más violaciones de derechos y más violencia contra las mujeres y las niñas? Lo que sí sabemos es que todas las ucranianas que hayan dado a luz o que estén embarazadas van a encontrarse en muy serias dificultades, ya que no existe ninguna cláusula en el contrato que prevea el desistimiento y podrán ser demandadas por los compradores si interrumpen el embarazo o si no entregan el bebé en plena guerra, enfrentándose a penalizaciones de importantes sumas de dinero que no tienen y viéndose obligadas a criar y alimentar un hijo que no deseaban tener. Cuando un Estado legaliza o tolera la gestación subrogada, es decir, cuando el delito de trata, el delito de alteración de la filiación y el delito de venta de menores, porque siempre hay dinero, dejan de ser delitos y pasan a estar amparados por la ley o por la inoperancia de las propias instituciones del Estado, de ahí en adelante todo es posible, porque las mafias evidentemente no se van a arredrar ante esa legalización de delitos ni van a volver a sus cuarteles de invierno, sino más bien al contrario. Y además ya sabemos que una de las justificaciones para legalizar la explotación reproductiva es precisamente el argumento de que, puesto que ya está ocurriendo, legalicemos. Y se legaliza sin desarticular las mafias, que no son bandas de gángsters a lo Al Capone, sino profesionales de cuello blanco, como dueños de clínicas, médicos, abogados, psicólogos, notarios, empleados de los registros, así como directivos y personal sanitario de cientos de hospitales que alquilan quirófanos semiclandestinos, paritorios y habitaciones donde las mujeres explotadas dan a luz y pasan unas horas, pocas, antes de ser enviadas a la calle, solas, con los puntos de la episiotomía o de la cesárea aún frescos. Y aún con suerte si cobran el último pago por la entrega del bebé que acaban de parir. ¿Qué estamos viendo ahora con la guerra de Ucrania? Por ejemplo, estamos viendo a la Fundación Madrina en España ofreciendo alojamiento a madres gestantes ucranianas por subrogación para españoles hasta que nazca el bebé. Así lo ofrecían, alojamiento hasta que nazca el bebé. Y después les pregunté y no quisieron responderme, pero desde aquí aprovecho para preguntar de nuevo a la Fundación Madrina, ¿qué van a hacer ustedes con esos bebés después de que nazcan? Ustedes saben que la gestación subrogada es ilegal en España. ¿Qué van a hacer ustedes con esos bebés? ¿Qué destino espera a las madres después de dar a luz? Si algo estamos constatando ahora, lo mismo que en el año 2020, cuando la pandemia, es que los medios siguen haciendo caja con las odiseas fabricadas de los pobrecitos explotadores de mujeres compradores de recién nacidos, y que hay gobiernos que sucumben fácilmente a la presión mediática. Una carta escrita por 24 explotadores británicos a la ministra de Interior de Reino Unido y publicada por The Sunday Times llevó al gobierno británico a conceder visa de entrada a ucranianas embarazadas por encargo y contrato para esos 24 ciudadanos, con el fin de evitarles problemas con la nacionalidad del bebé si nace en otro país. Y también, al parecer, a madres subrogadas con bebés ya nacidos y sin papeles. Pero a ninguna madre gestante ucraniana se le otorgará visado en Gran Bretaña sin que los compradores lo autoricen. El gobierno británico ofrece a las madres 36 meses de estancia en ese país, pero lo más escandaloso es que los visados se otorgarán si los compradores lo autorizan y fuera de las leyes de inmigración vigentes, lo que se parece mucho a la trata organizada de seres humanos. Y lo peor es que el propio gobierno británico aprobó y llevó a cabo esta maniobra al margen de la ley para complacer a esos 24 ciudadanos británicos y que no echaran a perder su inversión. ¿Cuántos reportajes lacrimógenos han leído ustedes ya sobre pobrecitos explotadores que no pueden hacerse cargo de sus bebés comprados por culpa de la guerra? Los medios han encontrado un filón en la miseria humana, igual que ahora con la guerra que en 1220 con la pandemia, porque les da la oportunidad de publicar gota a gota esas odiseas fabricadas a medida para los explotadores. ¿Han visto ustedes el reportaje en el New York Times mostrando bebés entre 3 y 6 meses y pretendiendo hacer creer a sus lectores que habían nacido en búnkers al principio de la guerra? Nadie se preguntó por qué esos bebés tan grandecitos están todavía en poder de Biotescom. Son sencillamente bebés abandonados por sus compradores, ni más ni menos, y todavía en poder de la agencia. Se ven muy sanos. ¿Qué piensa hacer Biotex con ellos? No lo sabemos, no responden. En España, ese tipo de reportajes y entrevistas están obteniendo un efecto inesperado y actúan como un revulsivo en la opinión pública que exige llamar a las cosas por su nombre, compradores de bebés y explotadores de mujeres, y pide cárcel para ellos. Existe en este momento, ahora, la necesidad de elevar la voz en un clamor mundial y exigir a todos los gobiernos la abolición de la mal llamada gestación subrogada y que sea erradicada para siempre. Nuestra organización CIAMS tiene elaborado un proyecto de convención internacional para la abolición de esta práctica heredera del esclavismo y tenemos que instar a todos los gobiernos a que la firmen y ratifiquen para dar ya por concluido, más pronto que tarde, este periodo tan oscuro de la historia de la humanidad en el que fue posible comerciar con personas recién nacidas y arrancadas de madres explotadas. Muchas gracias por su atención. Compañeras, he terminado.
Compañeras, thank you so much, Berta, for this really full report, and thank you, Oti, for using the words that describe the reality, like clients and reproductive exploitation. There was some comments about sometime in French or Italian. Apparently, we use GPA, which is actually the language of the industry. So thank you for, helping us move forward with the language that describe reality and for speaking up for those women that are in atrocious condition. Our next guest is Maria Dimitrieva. She's a radical feminist and human rights activist in Ukraine, and she's speaking to us from Ukraine today. She's been advocating against surrogacy for the last 4 years, following the scandal of the COVID and now with the war in Ukraine. So with no further ado, Maria, we can listen to you.
Thank you, Clemence. Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me. A lot of what I was going to say, Berta said already. I will just add some things that are not obvious not known for people in other countries. First of all, the Ukrainian legislation on surrogacy is very slim. It amounts to a couple of paragraphs in one document that is a family, the Code of Laws on Family, and the other two are regulatory documents by the Ministry of Healthcare. And according to the Ukrainian legislation, surrogacy is available only to married couples, which have medically proven issues with the ability to get pregnant. So it is viewed as a treatment for infertility. And an actual mother, the one who carries the baby and gives birth to it, is not a mother to this child in the eyes of law. Which posits certain problems when clients decide not to pick up the commissioned baby, which happens significantly more often than may be overall believed. Because of this lax legislation and openness to foreign, to international adoption, not adoption, commissioning a baby by foreign nationals, Ukraine became a place where a lot of people come when they are too racist to go to India to commission a baby. And when India limited this practice, the influx of such clients to Ukraine increased even more. And we have had cases where women in Ukraine were encouraged to enter into fictitious marriages so that the intended parent, the husband, would be able to carry the child abroad, and they were as well getting pregnant through IVF in surrogacy clinics. There is no actual data about the number of surrogacy pregnancies in Ukraine a year, and there is no official data on how many babies are born through surrogacy in Ukraine. The activists collected the data on the number of such clinics and estimated that the number of babies produced by such clinics a year before the escalation of war was about 3,000. So 3,000 babies a year have been produced in Ukraine, and up to 95% were commissioned by foreigners. So it is not a practice encouraged or practiced by Ukrainian families. There are several more issues connected with this exploitative practice. As I said, Ukrainian legislation is very lax, and it doesn't provide any obligations for the commissioning parents to pick up the baby. So whatever the reason, they don't like the baby has the wrong color of their eyes, or it has some problems with health, they just don't pick it up. And they can commission as many babies as they can afford. There are no limitations on that. And there have been several cases where one couple would commission up to 12 babies, and there was an attempt to smuggle them out of the country. The babies were rescued, but the couple didn't face any prosecution because they were not Ukrainian citizens. Because those commissioning parents don't carry any responsibility, if there is no official document proving this child's nationality, they may not be given up for adoption, either in Ukraine or abroad. And just before the COVID lockdown began in Ukraine, I participated in an event. It was a closed door event by our governmental High Commissioner on Gender Equality. The event was dedicated to surrogacy and its implications for Ukrainian women. And a representative of the Ukrainian National Police from the department that combats trafficking said that in Ukrainian orphanages for the babies in the recent years, more than half babies that end up there come from surrogacy pregnancies. And most of them end up there because they have significant health issues that the clients don't want to bother with. So we have a situation where the clients don't pay taxes in Ukraine. The clinics pay very limited taxes. The women who carry the surrogacy don't pay any taxes. It is all paid under the table. But the burden of caring of babies with significant health issues falls on the shoulders of regular taxpayers in Ukraine. So it is, those babies would not have been born if the commissioning parents just gave it a little thought and decided not to exploit a woman. And they have been, the surrogacy clinics and clinics that collect ova, the eggs from women, they target the low income bracket and IDPs. They specifically target these groups through Viber groups, through forums, through online platforms where young mothers sell things that their babies have grown up out. They also place their advertisement in public transportation, in subways, in suburban trains, in local buses, the transportation system that is used by people who don't have much money. And we are now seeing, with the escalation of the conflict of Russia running a full-scale invasion of Ukraine, we see now a growing number of advertisements of surrogacy clinics in Ukraine and targeting Ukrainian women abroad, encouraging them to get into surrogacy business, to bring happiness to other people. They never mention anything about the health consequences. They never mention that now it is almost 5 times cheaper than it was 10 years ago. If you calculate a monthly income of the woman doing surrogacy, based on what she is paid if the baby is taken, is delivered, is alive and taken by the commissioning parents, it amounts to something about $500 a month. So it is not the money that is worth risking your life over, but for a lot of women, even this opportunity seems better than the options that they have available to them. And with this invasion in full scale, it was yesterday reported that more than 3 million people left Ukraine as refugees, and about as many are now internally displaced. We may reasonably expect that the surrogacy clinics are going to target these groups. And with our police busy trying to root out Russian saboteurs and marauders, they are not able to address the issues with domestic violence as it is, and it is highly unlikely that they will have resources to combat trafficking in babies. So Ukrainian women and Ukrainian feminists in particular encourage international community and international feminist movements to demand ban on surrogacy, on international surrogacy and surrogacy in general, so that it is officially acknowledged that it is trafficking in babies. It puts at risk the most vulnerable women, and it enables international organized crime to exploit women in ways that are now even worse than they were before. Thank you for your attention. I will be happy to answer any questions that you have for me.
Thank you so much, Maria. There's so much information, and I've seen a lot of things in the chat that you know, a lot of people, even here in Canada, feel really horrified by what's happening in Ukraine. And now that you explain us how it translates concretely in the day-to-day life, that there is no police and everything. So I will do like a brief conclusion about all the panelists. Like we've seen how surrogacy affects women, how our governing body, they attempt to regulate surrogacy, but more and more we see surrogacy is unregulatable because it is human trafficking, it is related to a form of slavery and baby buying. And so it's unregulatable, and whether it's targeted to women who have no other options. It was already poor women in Ukraine, and now women that are in a refugee status without proper police or a state of law. And it's even with women displaced in the UK, in Spain, to give birth. Anyway, so thank you. Maria has just shared our Facebook group, and that can be something that we can maybe do to help Ukrainian women. So I wanted to conclude with, we feel hopeless with surrogacy, but we have our head, we have reason, and you know, but we also have our heart, and we have the beauty of womanhood and motherhood and childhood on our side. So you can sign the declaration of that you can find on the coalition site. You can sign the Women Declaration at WDI, and you can also contact your day-to-day politicians, your MPs in your country. Okay, so for now, we will conclude. Thank you everybody for being there. Sheela was in the middle of the night, and Maria is in Ukraine. So we will really take hold of the Facebook group, and Siam will send you the link to the video that will be put on Facebook. So it's wonderful to feel connected despite the challenge that we experience in each of the countries. So thank you everybody for your attention, for being here, and for the Siam team to organize everything.